private browsing, an inquiry on usability and privacy protection. So this is currently published in WPES 2014, which is the workshop on privacy in electronic society. So this is a cooperative work between Rutgers University and Syracuse University. Before getting into detail of our study, first let me introduce the background about what private browsing is. So private browsing was first introduced by Apple in 2005 for their Safari 2.0 browser. And it was first designed for browsing without leaving any trace. So the family members or friends who share the same computer may not be able to see what page you have visited previously. And currently, it's a feature in most current browsers. So they're all available on Internet Explorer, Google Chromes, and so on. So what are the main functionalities of private browsing? So what it does is it basically deletes your browsing history after the browsing session is finished, and as well as the cookies that was saved previously, and that is also deleted. And there are also temporary files that are deleted depending on the specific browser that you're using. So private browsing, they might delete some of your saved password, your signing information, autofilled information, and your phone data. And the major purpose of private browsing is to protect against local users who share the same computer with you. This leads to the motivation of our study. So previous research is mainly focused on examination of private browsing functionalities. So that means they try to see what is being left, what kind of file or traces are still left in your computer, and whether it is possible to still recover those information, and that you'll be able to see your previous browsing history. But there is no comprehensive user study on how people actually whether people actually understand private browsing or not. So this is very important, because if there's any misconception between users in deception and the actual functionality of private browsing, there might have some potential privacy or security risk. So one of the examples would be if you overestimate private browsing's protection level, you may be much easier to release your personal information while you are visiting some untrusted websites, and this will take a serious risk in privacy and your personal information. And another purpose is to provide effective feedback for developers who's working on this. And we look at private browsing mode in different browsers. So there are 5 browsers we tested. It's IE, Firefox, Google Chrome, Opera, and Safari. So they all have the similar functionality. It's deleting the browsing history and cookies. But there are subtle differences in terms of the visual indicators. So how do you know that you're actually in the private browsing mode? And there's difference in handling extensions. Some of them are disabled. Some of the extensions are disabled by default in private browsing mode. And there's difference on the detailed or specific temporary files that were deleted in private browsing mode. So these include password and download list entries and so on and so forth. So this is the interface in Safari. So you can see that the visual indicator is marked with the red circle. In the address bar, it says private. That tells you this is in private browsing mode. And if you trigger private browsing mode, there's a dialog showing you, asking you whether you want to jump into it. And there's a paragraph explaining what private browsing does. And let's look at the user interface in Google Chrome. So this is actually called Incognito browsing in Google Chrome browser. So different from the previous one, it actually listed out what private browsing does and what private browsing does not do. So in the bullet point in here, for example, they emphasize that private browsing does not prevent malicious softwares or malicious websites from tracking your keystrokes or getting your information by monitoring your online activity. And so on and so forth. They listed all the possible cases that you need to be aware of while using private browsing. So this is again the private browsing in Opera. So this is actually a sunglass indicating that you're currently in private browsing mode. And the description here is quite simple. It's just 2 sentences telling you that you're in the private browsing mode, and after you quit that, all the information will be erased. It's not as detailed as the previous 2 showed that tells you what exactly that does. But you can click on learn more to get more information about it. So now I'm going to talk about the methodology of our study. So we conducted a survey study on Amazon Mechanical Turk with 200 participants from United States. So all of them are familiar with internet browsing. So we have 49% females and 51% males. The age distribution, we can see that all of our participants are over 18 years old, and they range from 18 to 68 years old, and with majority within the group of 18 years old to 37 years old. And the degree of the levels of education also varies from high school to graduate degree. To group our survey response, we categorize our participants into 5 categories based on their most used browser. So they are IE, Firefox, Google Chrome, Opera, Safari. And we compared our result with the statistical analysis from W3 schools, and we can see that the percentage of usage for each browsers are quite similar. And generally, we get a lot of responses from Chrome and Firefox, and relatively fewer users in Opera and Safari. So to understand people's awareness of private browsing, we asked participants whether they knew about private browsing or not. So in general, there are about 1/3 of participants that did not know about private browsing. So they were marked in this figure with the blue color that indicates participants who did not know about private browsing. And we categorize that into different browsers. We received relatively fewer replies for Opera and Safari. For Firefox and Chrome, they have relatively similar percentage, or they have fewer people who did not know about private browsing. And then to further understand the private browsing and how people think about that, we asked the participants, what is private browsing? And those are the categorized responses. So in the first category, a lot of people said it's only in the browsing history it was not saved. They did not explicitly mention cookies or were deleted or not. So some of the sample response is from P3. So it says participant 3 says from the browsing history, future users could not see what you used the internet for. And then in another category, we have participants mentioning both the browsing history and cookies were not saved. For example, participant 101 said that incognito browsing doesn't generate any browsing histories or tracking cookies. It's as though you're using the browser for the first time every time you use it. And then we can see other categorizations. So in here, some participants, those are 20.5% participants, pointed out that private browsing blocks websites and third-party organizations from tracking personal online activity. And I think that the information that you are dealing with completely anonymous while browsing. So this is actually not what private browsing does. So we pulled out 3 of the simple responses from participants. They said no personal data is collected by a website. It prevents other websites entering browsing history and tracking online activity. So this is actually, again, not what private browsing actually does. And then another participant, all browsing history, cookie, cache get cleaned, making browsing activity anonymous. And there are also other responses, which some of them doesn't really touch the topic, so we categorize them into a separate ones. And I pulled up 2 of the quotes here. Some of them just guessing that it could be some private mode, judging from the name. And some of them said the add-ons and scripts don't really work in this feature. So of course this depends on which browser you are using. Some of them disable those.
So those statements are all wrong?
Not necessarily
Like
all
the first
wrong.
3, are they correct or not?
There many have more or less misconception on this.
So those are misconceptions?
Right, in this category, yes. And then we also look at the response difference across different browsers. And for Opera and Safari, we did not get enough participants to compare with. So we just do not include that on this chart. And we have Internet Explorer, which has 17 participants, Chrome and Google Chrome and Firefox users. And similarly, I just marked with different colors from left to right. So it corresponds to previous category 1 and 2. And we see that the green color, that's basically indicating or trying to say that private browsing makes your browsing session anonymous and it helps protect your personal information and so on and so forth. So we can see that Chrome and Firefox, they have really similar distribution comparing to an IE, but IE has slightly less, has fewer users to compare with. And then we asked our participants the reason of using private browsing. So we can see the big portion of blue in here. So those are the ones who said it's general pointing out just browsing history and cookies are not saved. So they did not give any specific examples on why they want to use it. And the portion with 22% saying that it protects your personal information. So I have they all feel more comfortable to release or giving out or credit card information while in private browsing mode or some other sensitive information. And there are other specific types, like the green one says it's used for visiting dating and porn sites, and some of them use it for online shopping, and some of them use it for online entertainment during the work. So it basically means you are reading like online articles or playing some web page games while in a working computer. And some of them just try out for curiosity. This is again the comparison between different browsers. And in this case, even the Internet Explorer, we had only 3 participants who had actually tried private browsing. And this is the comparison with Chrome and Firefox. The only difference is most of the parts are relatively similar. So the big difference is just curiosity. Some participants from Chrome have portion of people responded just try for curiosity, while we do not see that on Firefox. And then we further investigate the web pages visited using private browsing mode. And 28% saying that there is no website preference, and with the remaining actually listed out all the web pages that they are commonly used in private browsing mode. And they have 18 porn on dating websites, and have 9 news and entertainment sites. Those include New York Times and some gaming websites. There are 7 social networking sites. This includes your Facebook, and some of them use it for Twitters and other social networking sites. And surprisingly, there are people using that for banking and finance sites because they feel more safe using private browsing mode. And of course, their portion use it for shopping sites and some workforce, which is Amazon Mechanical Turk, where we conducted our survey, and some of them use it for Swipebox. So we also checked when people want to use private browsing. I found that majority of them, 39.5%, prefer to use private browsing at night after work, and we don't find much huge difference comparing to all other categories. While in the fewer people in the morning use it in the morning before work, and others is basically participants mentioning that there's no reference or preference on times. And this is the summary of participant thought about the private browsing benefits. So despite the big portion, 59% here saying that it just protect personal privacy or no cookie stored, 13%. And we received some interesting benefit and responses. So it says it keep your computer clean because there's no cookies from malicious website being installed, and they prevent malicious sites attacks, and some of them said it actually prevent the wireless attack and block ads online, so which is not what private browsing does. So this is the drawback. About half of our participants say there's no drawbacks, and some of them said that the drawback is because your browsing record is not saved. And if you found something interesting and wanted to go back to the previous ones, it's not there. And similarly, you have some signing password not saved as well. And other responses are quite, it's 11% of our participants, and the majority goes into about 4 subcategories. So it says some agencies can still track on personal online activities, so which is true. And actually, it doesn't really prevent people tracking online activities. And one interesting one is it encourages the secrecy and dishonesty in our relationship. So to conclude, we have 3 findings. So 1/3 of participants were not aware of this privacy-enhancing feature. So even for people who had been using it, they had various of misconceptions. Some of them feel more comfortable to use it for banking, or this will actually may be able to raise the risk while browsing online. And we found that the Firefox and Chrome responses are relatively similar comparing to others. And our result indicates that better methods are needed for browsers to inform private browsing feature. And we need to emphasize that what private browsing does not do to try to avoid misconceptions. And that's it. Thank you.